Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper. We're going to begin with our world lead. Any U.S. warplane flying over a Syrian government-controlled area could now be shot down by Russia. That is the stark warning from the Kremlin today after the U.S. shot down a Syrian jet over the weekend, one that the U.S. Pentagon says dropped bombs on U.S.-backed anti-regime forces. Russia issuing this threat of sorts to the U.S. Stay out of our way, saying any aircraft spotted west of the Euphrates River will be treated as, quote, air targets. Let's bring in CNN's Barbara Starr, who's at the Pentagon. Barbara, how seriously is the Pentagon taking this threat from the Kremlin?
Well, Jake, to be clear, the Pentagon not looking for a dogfight with the Russians, but taking it strongly enough to respond to it, Jake.
U.S. pilots flying over Syria now on the lookout for Russian airplanes or missile threats following the weekend shootdown by a U.S. Navy F/A-18 Super Hornet of a Syrian warplane. This because the Kremlin threatened that any U.S. warplane operating in certain areas of Syria would be considered a threat. When the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was asked if he was confident that Russia would not shoot down a U.S. warplane, the answer was carefully worded.
I'm confident that we are still communicating between our operations center and the Russian Federation operations center, and I'm also confident that our forces have the capability to take care of themselves.
Defense Secretary James Mattis taking the threat seriously, his spokesperson issuing a statement. As a result of recent encounters involving pro-Syrian regime and Russian forces, we have taken prudent measures to reposition aircraft over Syria. The Pentagon won't offer details, but the goal is clear. Get U.S.-backed ground forces to push ISIS out.
They're sending warnings to the Syrians, to the Iranians, and to the Russians that this offensive must be the top priority and it cannot be hindered.
When a Syrian warplane attacked those U.S.-backed forces on the ground, the U.S. reacted. It began Sunday at 4:30 p.m. Pro-Syrian regime forces attacked the U.S.-backed fighters near the city of Tabqa, a key area on the way to Raqqa, the ISIS capital, driving them from their fighting positions. U.S. aircraft flew in, launching flares to scare off the pro-Assad units. The U.S. also contacted the Russians to try to stop the fighting. At 6:43 p.m., a Syrian Su-22 dropped bombs near the U.S.-backed fighters. It was immediately shot down, the coalition said, by that U.S. Navy aircraft as a matter of self-defense.
And a full court press is now on by the Pentagon and the Trump administration to try and calm all of this down. As a first step, they want to make sure that they are still talking to the Russians and the Russians talking to them on that so-called deconfliction line, the communications channel they use almost every day to make sure that nothing escalates and gets out of control. Jake?
Barbara Starr at the Pentagon for us. Thank you. Joining me now to discuss this is Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. He serves on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and did tours in both Iraq and Afghanistan as an Air Force pilot. Congressman, good to see you as always. So Russia called the shoot down a, quote, act of aggression and is threatening to suspend military cooperation with the United States, if not worse. Do you think that Russia would actually actively target an American warplane?
I think it's one thing to actively target. Target means basically just painting on radar. It's kind of a show of force. The guy in the plane, our plane, would know that he's being painted at that point. And that could be, indication to attack that radar that's painting. But to attack an American military aircraft, I think Vladimir Putin is a pretty smart guy. I don't like him, but I think he's smart. And I think he knows that to attack an American warplane would basically mean the end of the Syrian Air Force and potentially could have some real damage to the Russian S-300 missile defense system that I would imagine the next reaction if we saw our aircraft attacked would be to take out their S-300 missile defense. And frankly, the Russians don't want that because it would show how ineffective the S-300 could really be against American military.
On a human level, you're a pilot. What would it be like for a U.S. pilot to fly into Syria and possibly on an assignment that would take him or her west of the Euphrates, which would then put them in direct harm's way, according to this threat from the Kremlin?
Well, it's frightening. It would be disconcerting, but this is what they train for. They train every day to fly into hostile environments where you're bombing a target with a nation that has a full integrated missile air defense system that has capable aircraft of intercept. So it's not like this is new to them. They've trained for this, but it is noteworthy that this is the first air-to-air engagement we've seen against a manned aircraft since 1999. So this is very rare. Despite all the training that a pilot can get, nothing's like the real thing. So my guess is there's some nerves going into this. But again, the Russians would be really stupid and the regime would be really stupid to think that somehow engaging American military after they just bombed a ground force attacking ISIS, if they somehow think that would be smart, I would actually think that they wouldn't think that, because I think they'd know better.
Congressman, the U.S., as you know, is leading the coalition air campaign in Syria. We have nearly 1,000 U.S. troops there. Are you afraid that we're headed for further military confrontation with Russia and Syria?
I don't want that without us having prior planned it, definitely not with the Russians, but I do think that in order to eliminate extremism in Syria, in order to take out ISIS, ultimately we're going to have to go after the regime, not necessarily militarily, but forcing a negotiated solution, which may take strikes to do that. But that has to be on our timetable, and as President Trump, who I think has handled this very correctly, we've reacted against Syrian regime forces a couple of times in an exclusion zone in Syria, against ground forces. We've done this against this plane, and you're not seeing a lot of bravado out of the administration. It's kind of the silent strength that says, hey, look, we're putting down red lines. If you cross these red lines, it's going to cost you. We're not seeking a confrontation, but this is our area of operation, and don't come into it and don't attack our forces.
All right, Congressman Kinzinger, stay with us. We have much more to talk about, including the White House today responding to questions about whether or not there are tapes of the president's conversations with fired FBI Director James Comey. That story next. Stay with us.